Welcome, welcome, do-gooders.
How are ya?
We have got a lot of love in the house today, and we are joined. I look over right now at our guest, and there's just like a cat that jumps up right behind her in circles. You'll have to get on YouTube to watch that. But we are joined today by Kristi Hayes, and she is a founder, an author, a podcast host, and I think the thing I love most about your bio, Kristi, is that the first thing written about her in her bio is mama of two. What an authentic and outstanding first line. So wife to Grant, founder of Strong Story. And we're going to talk about Kristi's got her hands in a lot of different things. But the thing that I love so much is how a little lunchbox note changed their family's life. It became a family mission, inspired a company and a podcast. And so here's this family who is made it their mission to not only love each other well, but go out into the world and love well. And we're going to find out how this all started. We love finding great stories. So Kristi, welcome to the We Are for Good podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we were asking Kristi before we joined where she was based out of, because she's kind of lived all over the country. And she said, I'm actually in Waco, Texas. And Julie points out, yeah, you have a strong Magnolia vibe behind you. And she says, oh yeah, Chip and Joanna Gaines built this house. Casual. So another reason to get on YouTube so you can look at the background of her house.
And look how well lit she is compared to us.
It's very
just
well
all real
lit.
good.
Chip and Joanna, if you're listening, I love you.
Julie puts in a little plug. So Kristi, I mean, just give us a little bit of background about the Be Strong Story, the Be Love podcast, and how you started on this journey.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think how many years. I feel like I mess it up every time. But when my son was in first grade, first of all, thanks for having me. I love this.
Oh,
I love
so
that
glad you're here.
So fun to see you guys. And congratulations on your new podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Podcast love.
So very cool. And just to add, when I used to work in the nonprofit world, we needed this so much. So where were you 10 years ago? Just FYI.
We were dreaming of this. We literally were sitting there dreaming about it.
Yes. It took a while to get here.
So yes, our company and podcast and new children's book all started with a lunchbox note. And so my son was having some trouble on the playground with a friend who he wasn't being treated so nice. He would come home. He would be sad about that. At the time, I was like in survival mode as a mom. So my husband traveled 4 days a week. I had like a first grader and what was she? 3 years earlier than that. So preschool. And I was just trying to survive. If you know what that feels like as a parent,
Yep.
We were in that mode. It was not the sweet spot mode. And I remember making lunches. Now lunches are my most hated thing to do. I would
most hated of all time. I would rather clean up vomit, yes, than do lunchboxes. I would.
I hate it. I'm just like, at the end of the year, I'm like, just take some Lunchables and just. So it was about the middle of the year and I was making their lunches. And, at the first of the year, especially with, your first kid going to kindergarten and first grade, you're still writing those cute notes.
Very ambitious.
And at this point, I was like, just screw that. Like, here's some Cheez-Its and a banana. And hope for the best, Holden. Hope for the best. So my husband happened to be home during the week, and I said, here's the deal. I can't make any more lunches, so you're going to have to do it so our kids don't die. And also, could you write a really great note in there that's really inspiring because your kid's going through a hard time? And so, for me, I would write this like exquisite note that I would think that would change his heart. Yeah, my husband is very simple, and he wrote 3 lines. Be strong, protect the weak, love everyone. And that has been our mission and motto for our family. It just started very organic. I just remember posting on Facebook and just saying, how awesome this note was. And I'm one of those moms that always love a mission for our family. And my family's like, oh, Mom. But this one can stick because it's so simple. And so for us, the Be Strong is teaching our kids like to be strong in who they are, because people are going to tell us all our lives, no matter if we're young, teenagers, 40-year-olds, they're going to tell us something that we're not. And so I want them to be so strong in who they are that when those labels and those lies come, that they are like, no, that's not who I am. Protect the weak. We have a phrase that we say with our kids, eyes wide, light shine. And it's just to keep our eyes open to those everywhere we go, whether it be on the playground for them, at recess, just they're scanning to make sure everyone's got somebody. Same for us as adults, right? If we're in a group, that we're making sure everybody's feeling included. And then the last line, love everyone, is it seems like the easiest, but it's the hardest of all. And so we really wanted him to know, even though this little boy didn't treat him well, like he still needed to love him, because that we're called to do that. So that was kind of the mission and motto. It started as that. Then we did the apparel line. We worked with a company in Colorado, a homeless shelter. That was my dream, to have a homeless shelter make these shirts, which was so funny because my husband's like, number one, you don't know any homeless people, and number two, you don't know how to screen print. So how are you going to do that?
Funny enough, hey, my wife and I did the same exact thing. Like, we had a brand several years ago called Love Well, but we did the same thing. It's like, you don't know what you're doing, and all of a sudden you're like running a little fashion apparel line, right?
Yep.
Oh
you
my
just figure it
gosh.
out. It's so great. I love this.
Clothes were fantastic. Baby clothes. Yes.
So fun.
You totally figured out. And I remember going to church. We just moved to Denver. This lady's like, what do you do? And I told her, and she said, do you need like a screen printer? She's like, I don't know. She's like, I have this homeless shelter I work with, and in the back they have this screen printing. They give jobs to those who are former homeless. I don't know if you'd be interested in that. I was like, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, sign me up.
She took your dream and gave it to you on a silver platter. Here you go. Right.
So we did that for the last couple of years, and then we've kind of expanded it to online. As COVID, we've been doing it anyway, but as COVID kind of hit, we had to shut down a little bit of the screen printing. So we just finished our first children's book. That is the story of this whole thing, and just teaching kids to love others well. And then we have a podcast called Be Love, where we share stories of those who are loving well, and hopes to inspire us to do it in our own way. And then we have some family coaching that we do. That's really just us doing it, because we have to do it in our own life anyway. And we're just sharing what we're doing with others.
I love that. This is just an awesome story, because, and I heard this I was explaining that our family had our own little brand that we ran for a while called Love Well. But it was the same thing that I always heard from people of like, we want to be able to do something as a family, and people would always come to us and ask us how to do that, because it's such a neat concept to get to bring your kids along and get them to see you, hustling hard, but also just like the impact of what you're doing. So I'd love to just kind of hear this part of the story, maybe when you realize like, okay, how are we going to take this from a note to like, we're making clothes? Like, what was that piece like, and how did you involve your kids in the process? I'd love to hear that.
Right. Yeah, it took a couple years to do that. I mean, I think we started doing it on the side. I had another printer before we worked with the homeless shelter. We made a website off the fly that we,
love it.
Square was pretty easy for us to do. It was super easy and chill. And I have an entrepreneur's heart, so that's something that's very exciting for me to do. So yeah, the fun thing is involving our children. So they might have more say than I'd like them to have. My little girl has a lot of say in
like on styling,
more
decisions.
Bedazzling, more sequins. Yes.
Yes. More sequins, Mom, more pink. So I let them have a huge say in it. They would come to the shelter with me. And so that's the thing, is like, I want my kids to build relationships with those who have a different background than us, who have a different story. That's really the mission of our whole company, is that proximity matters. So for me, it was always making sure that my kids were in proximity with someone who had a different story than us. And that was from the beginning of time when, Holden was 4 years old and we saw Homeless Under the Bridge, and he had such a heart for that because he saw it every day. And so I think that was a huge piece. And so involving them, our book, I'll show you, that's Holden. So he had his own, I had to take it to them and say, what do you think about this? And we had to change some lines because he's an introvert and he didn't want to be put on, he doesn't love being put on display. And so I had to very much go back and forth with him on this and say, okay, do you feel comfortable? How do you feel about this? This is going to be something that's inspiring to others, but I want you to feel comfortable with it too. So I don't know. I think it's so cool to be able, when you are an entrepreneur working, to bring in your family as much as you can, because it shows them, number one, hard work and what you're doing, but it also makes them feel a part of that whole process.
I think the reason I like this story so much is because I've been writing Lunchbox notes to my daughters, since my eldest was in kindergarten again. And I think that's just like a very natural entry point for a lot of parents to come in. And the irony of her story is that I started writing them for myself because I had so much angst about, this little emotionally charged child going into kindergarten. She was the youngest in her class. And I will tell you, writing a note for a kindergartner who is like not able to read well, was very challenging.
Hieroglyphics or something.
Yeah. There was a lot of that. I mean,
Pictograms.
yes, drawing pictures, little stick people, and John's the artist and I am not. But it's like, I just wanted this moment during the day for her to see, Mom loves you, be good, and then I noticed that I would hear things just in life. I would be reading them. I would be listening to a podcast. I would hear somebody kind of give this little wisdom nugget, and I would start writing them down on the notes section on my phone. I mean, I was showing John and Julie before we got on the phone with you. I mean, 6 years later, just pages of notes, and I go to that every once in a while for these Lunchbox notes because, yes, lunches are the bane of my existence. I mean, every day, these kids, they just have to keep eating.
Try with 2 sets of twins.
I
mean, it's like an
John,
assembly line
I
of
don't even
four,
feel like I can
4
complain.
children. Like, it's a lot.
I'm just seeing like Lucy and Ethel at the chocolate
Yeah.
factory trying to put together your lunchboxes. But our kids have just gotten so accustomed to look for that and to see what did Mom write today. And it's just such an easy, simple thing to remind them to be kind, to remind them who they are and what we stand for. So I just think this is really fantastic. So talk. You were in nonprofit for a little bit, and would love to hear the background of that story. And I wondered if you learned any lessons just in nonprofit and service of others that you're applying to this company now.
Yeah, I think what I've learned and what I learned in the nonprofit world when we lived in DC is that you have to run everything with excellence, no matter how big or small. So a lot of times nonprofit get a bad rap because they don't get back timely. It doesn't look professional. And I had a boss who really helped me understand like that's important. And we worked in DC. And so it was so important to be professional and to get back to people on time and to, you can still do that with a small number of people. A lot of times nonprofits aren't sourced. You have one person or 2 people or 3 people doing 50 different things. You feel all over the place. But I think for me, it was making sure that you're excellent in those things and that you're being professional and excellent like a business. You want to be looked at, like that as well, just in the way that you present yourself. And so I think I've learned is that it doesn't matter how big or small your company, your nonprofit is, you can still treat it with excellence. And even the smallest things that you do.
I think that's a great answer. Yeah, it is good advice. And I think that just the tie to your family and to your children and how this company is really informing who they're going to be as citizens. And I wonder if and I'm sorry, John, I just hijacked your next question, but it just segued beautifully into this. I'm just curious how you've seen your children change as a result of watching your husband and yourself take on this mission, and how have they learned how to be a light to others? I love the proximity matters piece. And how are they able to have their worldview expanded that you've been able to witness?
Yeah, I think because we do this on a daily basis, it makes us be in those spaces, right? So we're teaching this to others, so we need to live it out ourselves. And so for me, one of the biggest things that I want to do as a family is, again, to make sure that we're in relationship with others, that we're serving, that we're loving, that we're not just coming in there to serve like, we're so awesome, we're going to serve you today, but we are building true kinship. Kinship is my favorite word that Father Gregory Boyle talks about, who runs Homeboy Ministry. And it's a kinship. It's I'm learning from you and you're learning from me. And so I think a lot of times we go in as nonprofits, as people with great intentions. We want to help, we want to serve. This is the way we do it because it works for us. And I've learned so much that what works for me doesn't work for everybody else because my background and my story is so different. And so if I come in with a humble heart and say, how can I help, instead of here's how I'm going to help you, it changes everything. And so I've learned that the hard way. I remember going into the homeless shelter and we're providing them jobs they fulfilled and packaged our stuff and they screen printed. But then we had a whole section of the homeless shelter that I was like, okay, we can do like leadership classes and da-da-da-da-da. And I remember the main guy, he looked at me and he was like, I love your energy. And
I feel a compliment sandwich coming on here.
Appreciate you. He was like, but that's not your job here. He was like, your job is not to do that. He's like, your job is to love them. And I was like, noted. I was like, okay. And so I think that changed really everything for me, is coming in with a heart that says, how can I help? And I did it for so long. The other way is, here's what's going to work for you. And that does not work.
And God bless the nonprofit director who has the courage and the cojones to say, stay in your lane. You know, I appreciate what you're doing. I value your volunteer and entrepreneurial spirit, but stay in your lane. And really all I need you to do is love. And what a simple thing for us all to kind of grab onto.
Yeah, I think and about the kids, I know you asked me about the kids. For me, I always tell parents, like, make sure you're sharing with them your day. Like, if I encounter someone during the day that I've been able to love, or even just the podcast, like we talk about that all the time. Like I tell my kids, and so, you know, they heard about our last podcast with Nathaniel, who has the Treacher-Collins syndrome, like Augie in the book Wonder. And they asked me so many questions. Mom, what was that like? And you know, what did the mom say? And, you know, it just gets them talking about it. And, you know, when every morning when we leave, it's eyes wide, light shine at the carpool. It's a dap and eyes wide, light shine. And then it's, how did you keep your eyes open today? How did you let your light shine today? So it's just reminding every single day that same thing. I mean, the carpool people say it now. They hear me say it all the time. They're like, now they say it. But I think it's just, you can't remind them enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, hearing you, I just feel like you believe in mantras so much too, of just when you say something and you repeat it, like that's how you teach and that's how you instill the values. And I love that they're just so clear for your family and for your business. And I feel like that's an actionable thing we can all take from you, you know, is just how do you define that and get people excited about the same ideas? And I feel like you've just done that so well. So Kristi has the Be Love podcast, which is awesome. I think you're like 70 episodes in, right? So you've been doing this a while. But I know, you know, story is such a big part of your whole experience. Is there a story that stuck out that you maybe get to be a part of through that podcast that you'd want to share with us?
Gosh, there's so many. I mean, I told you, I almost feel guilty like every week that I get this incredible leadership lesson in my closet. That's where I podcast, in my closet. I'm not my Xbox headphones.
That's my mommy hiding space, is like when I just need a moment is my closet. You made it your podcast studio. Bravo.
It's the closet. So I feel like I've learned from so many different people. And one of the things that I love the most is really helping kind of dig into the heart. And so, you know, the last couple podcasts we did, I don't know if you've ever read the book, Same Kind of Different as Me.
Oh my gosh, I love that book.
I haven't.
So good.
And just his story is so amazing.
True story, right?
True story.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear the backstory of all that. We just interviewed, I don't know if you've seen the show New Amsterdam on ABC with the doctors. So we've interviewed 2 of their doctors, and the one that does next Wednesday is the mental health doctor. And they're so used to being asked about their character that I always ask them about who they are. And he was so vulnerable. And what I learned through these stories, that every person has a story. Every person has pain. Every person needs love, no matter how famous you are to whatever, every single person across the board. And I think it just reminds me, I do this thing at the end where I secretly get quotes from their friends. And then at the end, I just remind them, like, no matter how amazing you are, what you've done, I want you to know that you are loved just who you are. And that's kind of my journey. I love to do, but I have to remember to be content in who I am, not in the things that I do. And so I just remind them of that. I think it's just a reminder to myself, but I just remind them. And at the end, I say all these quotes that their friends have said about who they are as a person, not so much what they do, but who they are. And I would say 80% of the people that I interview, men included, bawling at the end. Like, we have to shut it off. I'm like, it's okay, we're done recording. You don't have to say anything, because words matter. And so I think it's just a reminder to me, no matter how amazing their story is, they've all been broken. They've all gone through something. And it just, reminds me that the Instagram pictures that we see and the things that we see on the outside, that's not everything. And so that's what I love, just kind of getting a sneak peek into people's hearts and lives.
I think that's such a great hack. We may have to implement that, because I think the reason probably that strikes such a chord is because you understand that people see you for exactly how you are, and it's such a gift. And I think this concept of storytelling that you've grabbed onto, I mean, it's such a cornerstone of our company as well. And I'm a big book nerd. I love to read, especially fiction. And I actually thought what you said before we actually started taping bears mentioning to our community about wonder. And because that was such a big book. My daughter read it in her 4th grade class, maybe 3rd grade class. So I read it too. And I mean, you have Julia Roberts that's headlining this major Hollywood picture. But I thought the story of what that has done to change families with Treacher Collins bears repeating. So could you just share that story with our listeners right now?
So we interviewed a lady named Magdalena Newman. She wrote a memoir called Normal, A Mother and Her Beautiful Son. And so the book Wonder is a fictional book. And most people think, I actually thought it was a book based on this lady's story. It's not. It's a fictional book. RJ Palacio had, when she was a young mom, her son saw a little girl with Treacher Collins and like flipped out. Because they look different. Treacher Collins is a craniofacial disorder. And so their eyes droop and they just look very different. Now their brain function, everything functions all right. But, a lot of times they have to have like 70 plus surgeries to help them breathe, to help them, all the things that didn't form right. So they, on the outside, they just look different. And so RJ Palacio's daughter or son had a reaction that she was super embarrassed about. And instead of saying something to the mom, of course, when we're in uncomfortable situations, we sometimes don't know what to do. And so she just left. And she felt so guilty about that and so embarrassed that she's like, I feel like I have to do something. She ended up writing this fictional book about Augie Pullman, who has Treacher Collins and who, gets made fun of and all those different things. Well, fast forward about a month later, RJ Palacio had been at a hospital researching Treacher Collins, and she meets a nurse. And the nurse was the nurse of a real life boy with Treacher Collins named Nathaniel, and Magdalena was his mom. And so they got together. Anyway, fast forward, they became great friends, and now they speak all over about craniofacial disorders. How do you treat kids like this? One of the things I asked her after we kind of went through her story, which is so powerful, of how really for the first year, she had to help keep her son alive. They had to suction out all to make sure he didn't drown. I mean, it's just amazing. Then she gets cancer. It's like this whole story of incredible resilience. But one of the things that book did is for the first time help Treacher Collins be a quote, I'm doing quote marks, normal thing for people. And so kids weren't as scared that didn't have it when they saw someone, because this book kind of normalized these differences. And so she said it changed their life, because what they had been living in like secrecy, and people had, called their son a monster and had ran away from him. Now, because these kids were reading it in schools, they were treating him with kindness and curiosity. And she's like, curiosity is awesome. She's like, kids, of course, are going to be curious. They are seeing something different. Like, I'm not mad at them for being curious. But there's a difference between curiosity and being, kind, and also curiosity and being unkind. And so anyway, we talk about that, but I just thought it was such a cool story of someone who's making amends for something by writing a book, and how a fictional story, can change the life of a real life family and then thousands of other families.
And just unleash compassion in a new and wonderful way. When my daughter was reading this book, I mean, I was reading it alongside her, and it was just such a great moment where I could go in at night while she's laying in bed, and I would say, oh my gosh, could you believe this moment happened in the book? And, maybe it was a moment where Augie was being teased by someone, and I would say, "Could you believe that? How did that make you feel?" And I would feel her little, 8-year-old self feel just like the injustice of it all, and it just is this very natural conversation that you can weave in with your kids about how to be a good human and how to look for these things and how to not react in a way that's so visceral, but it can be more kind. So I just think that what you're doing, Kristi, is just so healthy and helpful. And to me, it starts with a lunchbox note. But everything about this conversation and this movement that you've created is about community to me and about conversation. I mean, a lunchbox note is nothing more than continuing these conversations that we have at home about our family values and the things that are important to us. I mean, I was talking to a friend the other day, and she's just a really incredible person, and she's been a teacher and a principal and a superintendent. And I was sharing part of this story with her, and she said, that's really no different than what I used to do as a principal. And I would take a Post-it note, and I would get all 650 report cards of all my kids, and I would write a note on there, and I would say things like, "Hey, Sarah, I am really impressed with your math score. You really moved that up this year. Great job." 650 times she would see each individual kid. Or she would say something like, "John, I know you can do better than this in your reading. I've seen you work hard." And so all of a sudden, she has created this culture in her school where her kids feel like she sees them. They're having these conversations. Parents are seeing these little notes. And what an enriched relationship that she can have. So I guess my point here to everyone listening is we can all, find where you are in life. If you're a teacher, write it on the report card. We're all giving evaluations. If we're leaders in our jobs, could we write a little nice something on there? Could we have our boss's boss reach out to one of our employees and tell him, "Hey, I've seen what you've done and I appreciate it." Can you imagine the kindness that could come in to the world by doing such a simple thing like the lunchbox note? I commend you. Sorry, I just dominated the conversation right there for a little while. I just am really excited about it.
Words matter. Words matter, and being seen. I'm learning just the more that we work with different groups, and when we go serve, we have a big group of families that we go serve together, and that's a huge thing for us. And names matter, words matter. I had a mentor when we first started seeing the homeless under the bridge, and Holden was like, "What can we do for them?" He's like 5. And I was like, "I don't know." And so a friend was like, "Well, why don't you make some kindness bags? You've heard that before." And so we stuck all the things in our car and, put them in a bag. And he was too nervous to give it to him because he's shy, and kids are different the way that they, react. And my mentor said, make sure that when you give it to them, that you ask their name and you repeat it back to them, because no one asks their name. No one cares about their name. And so we would literally go and I would say, "Oh, we want to give this bag to you." And I would forget to ask. And we'd get on the highway and Holden would be like, "Mom, you forgot to ask their name." And I was like, "Oh man." He's like, "You have to turn around and ask their name." I was like, "I'm not turning around." He's like, "You got to turn around." We would turn around on the highway.
Accountability buddies, our kids.
Are the biggest accountability.
Yes.
That's their name, because number one, that showed him it was important. And number two, it's just, just everyone wants to be known in some way. And so just the littlest ways, the older I get, the more it matters still to us as adults too.
And I just think planting those seeds with your kids about how to serve others, how to be kind. I mean, we're going to have a class later on that we're going to host about trying to instill philanthropy in your children. What are the things you can do? And who knows, you might get John and my kids on talking about philanthropy, which would be a hoot. So I just think these conversations really do matter. I'm wondering, Kristi, is there someone who's been a source of inspiration to you in your life that you feel like has kind of led you to this moment right now?
Gosh, I feel like I've had so many incredible mentors, and that's kind of a big thing for me, is to make sure you have someone in your life. I mean, I remember I would see someone that was living out something I wanted, and I would just literally go up to them and be like, "You don't really know me. We are in the same circles, but could you mentor me?"
I just stand over here very awkwardly?
Right. And it always worked for some reason, but I would say my parents, When you're growing up, you don't realize what your parents do. And my mom used to we would have Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we would always be around the table with random people. I would literally come into Christmas dinner and be like, who are these people at our table? Like my brother and I'd be like, who is this? Who are these people? And they would be like exchange students or refugees, or at the time I didn't understand. It was almost like annoying to have these random people at my table. But what I realized is that she was just making a place at the table for everybody. And that's what she did her whole life. And I think for us, it's a little more obvious. Like we definitely talk to our kids more about it, and we do it together. And maybe for my parents' generation, it wasn't like, this is what you need to do, or this is what we're doing, but we saw it. And I love the phrase, it's more caught than taught. It's one of my favorite phrases, because I think we can tell kids all day long, eyes wide, light shine, you guys, make sure you do this, da-da-da-da-da. But if they don't see me doing it, if they don't see me pulling over on the side of the road when someone looks like they're stranded, if they don't see mom, doing this or that, what does that even mean to them? And so I think it keeps me accountable, because I saw my mom do that. And it, even though she wasn't saying it out loud to me in such a way, you must do this, you must love people this way, she did it. And that's probably why I do it.
Wonderful.
Kristi, you have just, I think, inspired all of us, and we all are going to look for different ways to incorporate this into our families, into our work. I wonder if there's one good thing, this is a question we ask all of our guests, one thing that you could encourage everybody to do today to, love more, kindness more, or even just a personal development hack. I can tell you're a personal development junkie too.
Yeah, I just read that. Like, this is just a random, I just read it today.
Love it.
It's a bracelet. I love bracelets. And there's a bracelet that says spark joy. And every day I try to think, and even in this, I'll be honest with you, moving and COVID and all the things, have my bubbly, usually personality that has the mantras, that has that not feeling like that. And so I'm needing to kind of switch, just even in my quiet time this morning, it was like, Kristi, stop it. Let's switch what you can do right now, because there's a lot of things that you can't do. Things look different for you in business. Things look different for you, maybe even meeting people, because we're kind of still in quarantine-ish, but every day you can do something for someone else. And so for me, I just read that today, spark joy. How can I spark joy? How, when I leave someone's presence, that they feel more joyful than they felt before I was there. And that could be just, I used to have a thing on my calendar, and I'll still do this. I want you to encourage 3 people today. That could be a text, that could be a call, that could be like an old school letter, but literally just text a friend. You mean so much to me. I was thinking about you today, and I just love that you did this for me last week. It meant so much. Done. And those things, like when I get those, it lasts for weeks. Like, I'm a words of affirmation girl, so that those things do probably connect with me more than someone who that's not their love language. But just, it's so simple. Like, we make it out to be this huge, like, we have to do this, and oh my gosh, I can't run a business, I can't start a nonprofit, that's not my personality, I'll never contribute like they contribute. And that's why we do our podcast. I'm like, you can love in big and small ways. Every way matter. And sometimes actually the smallest, like, habitual ways are the ones that are most important. So I just love to remind people that, like, no matter your personality, no matter what your gifts are, everyone can love in their own way. Find that way and do it daily.
Be strong, protect the weak. I forgot the third one, but it's
love
like,
everyone.
go love everybody. Yes. It all comes back to that original mantra that your husband wrote that I think is so fantastic. How can people connect with you? We're definitely going to include links in our show notes to the BeStrongStory.com. Where are you on social? And tell us, if people are interested in the book, where could they go to find it?
So at Be Strong Story, so it's all one word, is all of our socials. And then our book, the Lunchbox Note, you can get it online. You'll get a signed copy if you do it from us on Be Strong Story, but you can also find it at Walmart. I think Target just sold out, so I don't think it's there anymore. Barnes & Noble online, and of course, Amazon.
Way to go, selling out on
Such a
Target.
big deal. Way to go,
so
Kristi.
let me just preface this real quick, because this is what happens. People are like, "Oh my God, you're such a big deal. You got on Target." Let me just preface, because I want people to hear this, because I think sometimes I look at people and I'm like, oh, they're so big
They've
time.
arrived.
Okay. Let me give this to you. So number one, we went through like a hybrid publisher. And basically when they publish your book, they're kind of like done with you. Like they're, like,
Bless and
here's your
release.
book and figure it out yourself, like figure out how to market yourself, whatever. So then you hustle, and then COVID happens and you have no book signings at cute little bookstores or libraries, and you got to figure it out. So we're Googling, my son and I, and I'm like, why is our book on Target? And he's like, what? And then we Google some more, and it's on Walmart. And we literally, I just want to tell you right now, we have no idea how it got there. There is a huge, I'm not kidding. It's not like, oh my gosh, your book's so amazing.
You, like,
Target
pitched
wants
to Target.
Okay, so the publisher gives it to like this printing, the Ingram Printing, which has like thousands and thousands of books. And then I think like Target and Walmart go in there. I don't even know the whole gist of it. They go in there and they find some books, and I have no idea. But Target and Walmart picked it up. It's out in Target right now, and then Walmart still has it. I wanted to
low
make
price
sure
at Walmart too.
I wanted to make sure it wasn't a joke, and I was like, I'm going to order it myself. So we have a video of us going to the curbside, and he's like giving it to me. I'm like, is this for real? Like, is this
I love
for
it.
real?
It was in the store too. That's so fun.
I know exactly how this happened.
Because it's
karma.
awesome.
It's karma,
it's
Kristi.
It's good.
It's you put something good in the world. I hope something good comes back to you. So I've just so loved this story. I just want to amplify it in every possible way. And the quote that's sticking out to me the most is just making a place at the table for everyone. So wherever you are in the world today, try to do your one good thing. Make a place at the table for everyone. It can start with a note, and look what can happen. So thank you, Kristi, for joining us and giving so much to our community today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.